Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, everybody. I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast. So our guest today is Pip Hare, who is the Queen of the Seas. And when you hear about how much courage, strength, stamina, badass energy this woman has, you're going to just want to run out, quit your job, buy a big boat, sail around the world.
Amen.
Pip, tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you. Great introduction. So I am a professional sailor and I specialize in single-handed ocean racing. And at the beginning of this year, I finished a non-stop round-the-world single-handed yacht race called the Vendée Globe. And in doing so, I became only the 8th woman on the planet to finish that race.
Wow. Well, the first thing I have to find out is how the heck did you get into that line of work?
I started sailing when I was a teenager. I kind of got into it then. My parents sent me on a sailing holiday to kind of just, first experience away from the family. And it really spoke to me then because when you're a teenager, you're wanting to start doing things for yourself, but there's a lot of restrictions on what you can do. And actually a sport like sailing puts you in charge. You're able to do your own decision making. You're driving, you're choosing how hard to push, where to go, all of this freedom that you really don't get on the land. And so that immediately appealed to me as someone who was ready to grow. And so I started reading a lot about sailing and the adventures and the competition around the world, and was particularly inspired by round the world races because I think they offered such incredible adventure. And I'd been reading about these fully crewed round the world races where kind of 10, 15 people got on a boat, sailed around the world. But all of them were men. There were no women doing it at all. And then one day I opened a magazine and there was a race in this magazine called the Vendée Globe race. And first of all, it was the same sized boats as these fully crewed races I'd been reading about. And secondly, this kind of second paragraph I read, I discovered that there was a woman competing in this single-handed non-stop round the world sailing race and being talked about in exactly the same terms as the men. And at the age of 17, reading this, I thought, A, this sounds like just about the hardest thing a person could possibly do. And B, women are doing it. I'm going to do that. And from there, that was it. That was my dream. That was my passion. And I created a career that has taken me to that moment.
So has it been about actually the mechanics of sailing and mastering the art of that, or is it a love of the sea, or what is it that really drew you in before you said, oh, she's doing that, I'm going to do that with her?
I think it's everything. I mean, I have always found sailing to be a sport that really grounds me. I find being on the water a very positive experience. It's always able to lift my mood. But in terms of a sport, it offers these incredible opportunities to push every part of what it means to be a human being. So there is the physical performance of it, but there's also this incredible tactical element. There's understanding the weather and the winds, but there's also this practical, mechanical problem solving with being able to fix a boat. And it just, I'm the kind of person that wants to stretch and push myself. I've never stopped learning. I've never stopped progressing. And I found a sport that seemed to be limitless. And I think that appealed to me.
Wow, there's a lot in that. Michelle, what do you think of this?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about your story of picking up the magazine and reading this article and going, oh my gosh, this is hard. And most people, they would close the magazine and go, fantastic. Good for her.
Yeah, right.
Where did this adventurism kind of start? So I know you mentioned this kind of hitting you and you being exposed to it as a teenager, but where did this come from? And were you always this sort of adventurer?
I think I probably always was. And I put it down to the fact that I'm a very curious person. I want to know, I'm really excited by the world and all the possibilities in it. I wanted to see as much of the world as I possibly could, but kind of, the natural world is something that I'm particularly interested in. But then also I'm curious as to what I can do as a human being. And so, I need difficult things in front of me to push forwards to. And once I've kind of achieved one difficult thing, I'll say, well, if I could do that, then maybe I could do this. And so I guess, things that are massively difficult, just, I want to know if I could. If I can't, well, fine. But I just want to know.
That's awesome. Well, how did people around you that were close to you react to this grand idea that you had of the solo race?
So actually, I didn't really tell anybody about it because I'm not a massively confident person, and I did not belong in that world. I went to a state school. I grew up in a landlocked county. I went on a sailing holiday when I was a kid, but I wasn't a member of a club. I hadn't been trained as a child. And so for me, from the outside looking in, and I really was, I did not belong in that world. I kind of decided privately and personally I wanted to be there. And I did make career choices around that. So, for example, I decided not to go to university after I'd finished school. But instead, I took an apprenticeship at a sailing school and I learned to become a boat captain. And so I guess, yeah, it was this quiet kind of determination towards it. I think I did disappoint my parents by not going to university, but once they saw me actually make a career out of this sport, they became happy and proud of me because all they ever wanted was for me to be happy and successful.
That's beautiful.
It's interesting that intuitively you knew to keep it, like, internalize your goals or what you aspired to do, and wait to kind of that show them, right? Get the education and show them, because I think, it's easy for us to share our dreams broadly, and we have a lot of people that are quick to, while well-intentioned, to squish it.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting topic. So the world of offshore and ocean racing is massively male dominated. I mean, enormously. Specifically in offshore and ocean racing professionally, there is between 5 and 10% participation by women. And when I was kind of making those decisions, when I was that 17-year-old girl, it was less than 5% participation from women. Jeez. And so, I never told anybody because they would think I was incapable or crazy or say you can't do that, or and I think I ended up having to fight my way. It took me 30 years to get to the start line of this race, and I ended up having to fight my way there and justify every rung on the ladder that I climbed. But the beautiful thing about it is that once I got to that start line, once the gun fired on the Vendée Globe race in 2020, then finally, I had the permission to just show people what I was capable of. Because when you're out on the water, you can either do it or you can't, and that's it. And all I ever wanted was permission to have a go.
That is really a beautiful story that's going to resonate with a lot of people because of that line you begin with, that you were not an overly confident person and that you were trying to make it in a world that was so alien to you. And that, for so many, is what they do every day when they go out and they try to go into their discomfort zone and learn and stretch and do things. And a lot of people don't have the courage to do what you did, which is just silently make up your mind and then get what you needed so that you were covered and ready. So I want to hear what you tell people who are lacking in confidence, the kind of wisdom you have for them. And then tell us the story of the 30 years it took to get to the point, because that's quite a commitment and that's pretty mind-blowing to hear.
So I think on the confidence thing, I've learned to nurture my confidence. I still don't have a huge amount of confidence, but I treat my confidence in the same way that I treat my physical preparation, and I train myself. And basically, I train my confidence by doing things that I'm uncomfortable with, saying things about myself that I'm uncomfortable with, saying them regularly, until I become comfortable with them, or I become comfortable with those situations. And then I move it on and I go to the next level. But like physical training, repetition is important. Making the correct incremental steps are important. So always pushing forward, but never making massive leaps. And also, sometimes you do get knocked back, and then you need to give yourself time to recover in the same way you do with a physical injury, and then you get back on it again.
So before we get to the 30-year thing, though, it is shocking for me to hear that you can say that confidence is still a challenge for you, because you have gone around the world by yourself. I mean, how can you not have the most confidence of anybody I've ever met in my life? So where does that come from? Why is that there? And at what point do you think you get to say, yeah, I got this. I'm confident. I'm bad.
I don't think I ever will. It is the complete truth. And do you know one of the reasons I love what I do, and I really love it, I mean, I love it, is because I feel probably sailing this 60-foot massive monster through the ocean, I feel completely unaffected by other people's perception of who I am and what I'm capable of. I believe that when I'm on the boat, I am the best version of me. I step up to things, I do things, I behave in a way that I struggle to replicate on the land, because I'm completely there's nothing holding me back. I can just be who I want to be, and it's up to me. And I'm a person that gets very affected by other people. And I find it difficult just to shrug that off and say, no, but on the boat, I can do that.
It's beautiful. And Michelle, isn't that surprising?
Yeah, I'm sitting here. So first of all, like, it's making me tear up. I have chills listening to this. I'm sitting here realizing that maybe I've assumed that a belief and confidence around self-reliance equates to confidence, self-confidence. And what I'm almost kind of interpreting as I listen to you is you have this incredible sense of self-reliance on the water. You're going to figure this out. And I'm sitting here thinking about how I would hope every person can find their place on the water where they're truly free to remove the noise and the distraction and the negativity and just go inside themselves and trust that they have everything they need to be whoever it is they are meant to be. This has kind of left me.
Yeah.
I'm really taken by what you just shared.
Yeah. And what you've described is the purest definition of passion that I've ever heard. And I've interviewed so many people who are passionate about what they believe in or what they do, but you are driven to do that, to be in that moment where you have this excellence and expertise. But I also have to believe at some level, maybe you're more confident than you know. It's got to be.
But confident in herself and maybe figuring it out. Like she's gonna be able to figure it out.
Do you ever, I mean, are you able at this point to sit on the deck of your boat and just have a glass of wine and not move?
No. So I guess just to kind of give you a snapshot of what it's like. So my race was 95 days long. And during those 95 days, I didn't sleep on average for longer than 20 or 30 minutes at a time, because the boat is just moving all the time. The energy in that boat is enormous. When it's under full sail, there's enough sail area to cover 3 tennis courts, and you have to stay in charge of that. So you've got this in a 24-hour period, you have this unbelievable job list that you couldn't possibly get through. You've got to fix things, you've got to maintain the boat, you've got to download the weather, you've got to strategize, you've got to call your team and report back into them, you've got to do your media reports, you've got to make water, feed yourself, clean the boat, all of these things. And so you're constantly doing risk assessments, you're constantly making lists, you're constantly trying to evaluate what is the most important thing I should do in any given moment. And then all the while, this boat is going on and on and on and on relentlessly. And when it's really fired up, oh my word, it's the most exquisite experience on the planet, because you are on a knife edge of just this exhilaration and this terror and this, am I pushing too hard? Am I not pushing hard enough? The noise is immense. The motion is throwing you all over the place. You're wet, you're cold, but there's a seamless interface between this power of the ocean design, this incredible design. Someone's designed and built this boat, and then I'm a human being. I'm making this work, and it is unbelievable. Just unbelievable.
So how long does that whole sensation sustain itself? I mean,
it can be for days. It can be driving like that for days. Or sometimes it would just be a few hours. I mean, I remember really vividly being in the Southern Ocean when I really started to push my boat harder than I'd ever pushed it before. And I kind of was almost paralyzed for 2 hours. I stood absolutely stone still, staring at the data numbers, watching the boat go faster than I'd ever seen it go. And I kind of was paralyzed because I just couldn't work out what to do. And it wasn't that, I knew how to slow the boat down, but I was having this massive internal conflict. Should I be slowing down? But I was so excited by how fast the boat was going and so impressed with the performance. And I kind of was just,
how fast were you going?
So, it's amazing. I mean, it's drugged me. I love it. I want to go back.
Yeah, well, now you're making us want to go too. But how fast are you moving out there?
So with my old boat was 21 years old. It was the second oldest boat in the race that I did. The top speed I had that boat at was 27 knots, which is about 33 miles an hour, about that. The boat that I've moved on to now, so the top speed of that is in excess of 40 miles an hour. So when we're really pushing that, I'll be doing 40, 45 miles an hour.
That's amazing.
I know I was watching, I watched the videos during the race itself, but I remember one that just really struck me. And you were very conflicted. You were frustrated with making decisions. You said, I keep wanting to make decisions using my heart and not my head. And you were going back and I was curious how that sort of turned out, because I think about how often, if I make a parallel right to business, how often we are unsure what to do. And we're not sure, when should the head take over? When should the heart and intuition take over? And in the moment, it's this feeling of crisis and helpless. You're in crisis and this feeling of helplessness. Whereas when you pull out of it, things become a bit more clear than they are in the moment. But how do you, in all this chaos that's happening, how do you sort of reconcile what you ultimately make your decisions based upon?
That's a good question, and it is quite complex. And I remember that video that I made because I had just exhausted myself, just absolutely exhausted myself making all of these sail changes on that day. And the guys who'd just gone in a straight line doing nothing did really well. And I tried too hard. But yeah, decision making and your sort of this dynamic risk assessment is a really important part of doing well in this race. And there's a couple of interesting things around it. So one is that we are constantly sleep deprived. In an average 24-hour cycle, I aim to get 4 hours. I will try and get more than 4 hours, but sometimes I might only get to sleep for 10 or 20 minutes in a 24-hour cycle. So I'm having to evaluate my own cognitive ability all the time around decision making and risk taking. And I do that by doing simple mental arithmetic. Before I make a decision or before I put myself or the boat at risk or what I perceive to be risk, then I do this self-check of some mental arithmetic. And if I'm struggling with it, then I know that I need to sleep, and I will sleep before I make those decisions, because actually even a 10 to 15 minute sleep just refreshes your ability to do that. But then the other thing is you need to be clear on your objectives. And so, I had my ultimate objective was to finish the race. That you have to finish the race. It's a race around the world. It's 95 days of racing. So I needed not to put the boat and me under so much risk that we wouldn't finish the race. But at the same time, it is a race. So therefore, there is a performance element. And a risk to me was actually taking this incredible opportunity that it had taken me 30 years to find, and then not making the most of it and not really demonstrating what I was capable of. So you're walking this tightrope all the time, managing objectives, and it's I think that was probably one of the hardest things, was knowing when to back off rather than when to push, I think.
Of all the people that I've ever interviewed, the person you most remind me of, and I'm curious if you've learned anything about her over time, is the late Susan Butcher, who was she was the big star of the Iditarod. So she won the most of them. She was the trailblazer with that. And so much of, just that quietness, the being in the moment of, crossing Alaska with all those dogs. And it's kind of the same thing. I wish you had known her. You probably would have been soulmates. It's an interesting, and just that quiet uncertainty that is replaced with knowledge of what you're doing. And that is really great. Now, when you were doing all of the prep for this, At what point did you realize that A, you were going to be able to do it, and B, you were going to be good at it? And then how does that translate for others?
Deep down, I always believed I was going to be good at it. And I don't know why, but if I didn't believe I was going to be good at it, I wouldn't have pushed as hard as I did to make it happen. Maybe I do know why. Maybe the reason I believed I would be good at it was because over time, over the period of my life, so many people have told me no. No, you can't do that. No, you can't go that way. No, you can't start here. No, this isn't for you. And every single time someone says no to me, I don't rail against it. I don't rail against them. I just turn around and I walk in another direction and I make it happen on my own. And I guess it's kind of that I will not let this go. I will make this happen.
Is that your self-talk?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. Yeah, yes, it is. It is. And I think ultimately, you know, it was such a hard journey to get to the start line. And at some point I just realized no one else is helping me with this. No one else is just going to open the door. I'm not going to walk through this. If I want to make this happen, I have to make it happen. I have to pick the thing up, carry it on my shoulders, and take every step one at a time. And it's only going to come from me. And so that really just created this incredible self-resilience. And I do understand that I have that. And what was interesting was lining up on the start line, I could have actually been very envious of my competitors because I was in the second oldest boat in the fleet. I had only had 2 years in that boat, whereas most of my competitors had 4 because the race is a 4-year cycle. I only found my title sponsor medallia 6 months before the start of the race. So I only really ever had the budget to work with a team and to upgrade my boat for the last 6 months. Up until then, I was doing everything on my own, everything. And it would have been really easy to look across at these other competitors and be jealous or be intimidated by what they had. But actually, I think when something isn't handed to you on a plate, when you've really fought and found ways to gain that thing, then it makes you a stronger person. And for this race, you've got to be strong in many, many ways. And I think I just believed in myself and I believed I had that strength. And I wasn't jealous. I just thought this journey I've been on actually makes me a better competitor.
How many years ago was the first time you did it?
So I finished school when I was 18 and I went to become a professional sailor, and then kind of was always looking for the first step on the ladder towards the Vendée Globe race, towards solo ocean racing. And I kind of look at them almost as lost years. In reality, they weren't, because all the time I was accumulating knowledge as a sailor and I was gaining ocean miles. But it wasn't until I was 35 years old that I realized I had to start this journey myself. And my first ever solo sailing was at the age of 35. And I sailed single-handed across the Atlantic at the age of 35. And it was a test. It wasn't a race. It was just to do it because I needed to take that first step, and I needed to prove to myself that this ambition that I'd carried for so long and never made happen, I needed to affirm with myself that it actually was something I wanted to do. So step 1 was just sail single-handed across an ocean, see if you like it. I loved it. I knew I was going to love it. Step 2 was do that again, but in a race. And so in that same year, I then went on to do my first solo race.
That's fantastic. So 30 years, how do you continue to love the process for 30 years?
Because there's always a next step. And, again, this is something that I love about sailing as a sport. You can never, ever know it all.
Yeah.
It's so enormously diverse. And actually, the discipline that I've chosen, single-handed ocean racing, is incredibly complex in terms of the amount of skills that you need, because you're not just the sailor, the athlete, you're the tactician, the navigator. You do all of the fixing and the problem solving. And so, I stayed motivated because there always was a next step and there always was a progression. I mean, and there were a lot of knockbacks along the way, and I wasn't always up from those. There were times where I just kind of thought, I'm never going to make this happen. I've reached the end of this journey. I've tried as hard as I can. This is just not going to happen. But then you kind of put it on hold. I guess that, I put it on hold. I went and tried something else, but there's just this nagging voice in my head saying, you could do this. You can do this. Don't give up on it now.
That is so inspiring. That is what happens when everybody on their journey hits a wall, which, if it were easy, we would all be superstars, but it's not. And I love what you said about still having more to learn. And Michelle and I were talking about this. I mean, I have been a writer since I was 15 years old. And I like a really hard edit on my copy because I want to get better. And you're never there. And I think that with you is probably where you are, is you just want to be the best sailor and then better than you were the day before. So that is a really inspiring lesson for other people who are even just going to their daily jobs, because don't be satisfied with where you are. Just always know there's more you can do and more you can learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember someone saying, I finished my Vendée in February this year, and I walked off the boat, and someone said to me, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "Well, another Vendée." They said, "Why? Why do you want to do that again? You've done it." And I was just kind of like, why wouldn't I want to do it again? I've done it, and I could see where I made mistakes. I can see how to get better. Why wouldn't I want to get better? Why wouldn't you want to just keep growing as a person? It's an incredible thing about human beings. We can do that. So why wouldn't we want to?
Yeah, Michelle, isn't this is just really very, very powerful.
To say the least. So what scared the heck out of you? What's like a scariest thing that you faced on that?
I mean, so there was always an underlying anxiety, I would say, around, have I done enough? Have I done enough to prepare the boat, to make the boat as strong as possible? And so I was permanently anxious about damaging the boat in a way that would stop me from finishing the race. And I carried that anxiety until I crossed the finish line. But the thing that actually scares me is climbing the mast in the middle of the ocean. I mean, the mast is 30 meters high, and I had to climb it twice to do some repairs at the top of the mast.
And it's moving.
The boat's sailing while you do it. And it took me, the second time I went up, it actually took me 2.5 hours of out loud self-talk to even clip onto the rope. I was so terrified. But I broke it down. I just talking out loud, I said, okay, why are you scared of this? How can you mitigate against this? Are you well trained enough? is this the right conditions to do it? What are the risks if you don't do it? What are the risks if you do it? What are the benefits if you do it? I just went through every single thing quite a few times, talking out loud. And eventually I talked myself into putting that clip on. And then I was up and down in 45 minutes. So.
Wow. That does take quite a bit of courage.
Yeah, I guess but you just, the fact was that, I have trained in it. I know it's something I am physically able to do. I picked the right conditions. It's just that no one in their right minds would think that hanging off a single rope on your own on a 60-foot boat that's actually sailing 30 meters above the water is a sensible thing to do. It's not.
When you're doing this, is everything being recorded for your marketing? And so do you have moments like that in your treasures kit?
Yeah, so I did. One of the things we set out to do at the start of my race was we recognized it. And I think this is an important point for me about defining success, because going into the race, everyone asks you this very obvious question of, are you going to win? And when you turn around and you say, no, I can't win. I'm in a 21-year-old boat and I'm only 2 years into my training. I can't win. So then they say, they're kind of like, well, why are you doing it then? And then they'll go, then they'll say, oh, is it a bucket list? No, it's not a bucket list. I am competing in this race. I'm a serious competitor in this race. And I think it's quite interesting. People kind of really struggle because the definition of success can be so one-dimensional. But we went into the race saying, okay, we can't win this race. As an athlete, I wanted to give the best performance I possibly could. And I felt that I did that. But as a team, we decided that our definition of success would be to tell the best story. And so I set out to relate the human element of what I was doing in a way that non-sailors could engage with and understand. Because actually, although the process of sailing the boat is massively technical, the process of being on your own and problem solving and dealing with the everyday on every level is what human beings go through all the time. And so we documented as much as possible. And I talked about the good times and the bad times and really tried to share that human story.
You did an exceptional job of that too. I mean, I know, like I say, we were riveted just it was like your best, reality series, except this adventure of all of this life and death instead of, what brand of shoes and did you get Botox today, which is what, you watch that mess on TV. And here's this incredibly courageous woman, as well as all of the other sailors that are out there pushing their limits to find out what's possible. And it was incredible. And I appreciated the fact that you brought us in and invited us in to participate in that with you.
I'm assuming you're nowhere near your limits at this point.
Mm-hmm. No, I don't think I have limits.
So as you push them, what else do you want to do?
Okay. I want to carry on growing as a person. I mean, on a professional level, then I am doing another Vendée Globe race and I've got a more advanced boat. So there's a lot of learning to do. I'm going to be 50 years old when I start that race. So, there are challenges ahead around the fact that I need to be physically strong and capable of sailing this piece of the boat. And I'm going to be competing with guys in their 20s. And I am going to be competing with them. So, on that side of things, then I want to push that. I want to carry on with that development. But I'm also a person that is massively excited about loads of other things. I continue to be pushing myself in other sports. I really enjoy endurance running, but also my learning is important to me. So I enjoy work with languages. I'm carrying on kind of actively working on my French and my Spanish, and just any growth anywhere. And I think at the point at which my physical ability declines, because it will with age, then I'm just going to push my mind. I'll find other physical outlets, but I will push my mind.
Talk about living your best life. I mean, truly.
Yeah. She's doing that every day.
Every day.
Not every day. Some days I do sit around in my pajamas.
No, but it's there.
Thank you. You validate me. But I'm restless too. And I look at Diana Nyad, who swam from Cuba to Key West when she was 65 years old. So I think you've got a few years left in you.
Good to hear it.
Yeah. It's so have you brought a lot of other women into the sport, and how have you mentored them?
I think I have had an impact. And actually I was at an award ceremony on Saturday, which was, the usual lineup. It still saddens me because I go to these ceremonies and I was the keynote speaker there, and they gave me an award, and there is not equality in my sport. And you look around the room and 50% of the women who are there are partners of the male sailors, and then there's a smaller percentage that are actually female sailors. So we've got a lot of work to do. But what was incredible was after I gave my talk, I had a line of women coming up to me saying, "You have made a difference. You have made me feel I belong. You have made me push myself." And I mean, that means so much to me because I struggled for so long. And yeah, it's incredibly humbling to hear people say that. But I think I don't just want to encourage women. I want to encourage everyone, because I think, I believe that sailing is an incredibly diverse sport in terms of, there are many different types of sailing, and there's a kind of sailing for everyone, and everyone belongs there. And I just want to keep saying that and keep showing that. But it's a big boulder to push up a big hill.
But it starts with someone. I mean, you truly are a trailblazer, and I love the inclusivity that you are mentioning to it. Everyone's welcome and it's possible for everyone. So it's just such an incredibly inspiring and encouraging story. There were so many things. I'm sitting here trying to make sense of some of the notes I took, but if I repeated back just a couple of things that really stood out to me, I loved your point on to build confidence, you train it just like you do your body, and dedicating time every day for those habits and practices to build your strength through the words you use, the actions, the challenges you give yourself. I've never heard anyone position it that way. So that really stuck with me. I also liked when you were talking about your risk assessment, and really asking yourself these questions. And I hear that as it's important that you know yourself so you can understand when you're on your A game or when you need to go back and recharge and reset. So you are putting yourself in the optimum position in order to make decisions in your life. At some point, you just have to do it. You just said at some point, you just have to do it. And then kind of the last thing that I say is my takeaway was giving us all the wisdom to say, find your place of the solitary strength where you can live out your passion without any of the distractions.
Yeah.
And you have done that on the ocean, on the water. And I just, what a gift. Thank you so much for sharing your hard one with us.
What a great story. And just the way you deliver it with so much heart and so little ego. I just am so honored to know you. So Pip, thank you so much for being with us and for everything you've done for every woman. What an amazing legacy you've got there. So thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you. There's some really kind words, and I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.